Beyond Meat has paid for a brand new study. We're going to find out the details here today on Jimmy Rants. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It'll take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. Follow me right here on Instagram. I am at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, you can engage live. Just like, man, so many people came in like suddenly. I was going to name off some names. I see Rachel is back. I see Downtown's RV. I see Successfully Spiritual, Firewolf, Ashton, Keto, Mama Wife. You guys just came in so fast. I was getting ready to say your names and it just all of a sudden. But thank you guys for being here today. We do go live 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. So thanks for being here. We also simulcast live over here on my Facebook page. So thank you guys for joining in today. And finally, last but not least, I haven't forgotten about you YouTube. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay right here on IGTV. We also put the past episodes up over on YouTube. Type in a keyword Jimmy Rants and you will find the show. And then Tuesdays, guys, that's today, I air a best of Jimmy Rants podcast on my flagship podcast, the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. So today, don't miss that one. It's a couple of episodes that I did recently about COVID-19. I'm trying to remember the topics, but as always, go check that out, LLVLC.com. And then finally, pop on over to the official website for this show. It's JimmyRants.com. Once you're there, you can actually see all the past episodes, quickly approaching 600 episodes of this show. And it's the way you can support the show if you like what I do here. Definitely click on the Patreon link or the PayPal link, and a donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. Okay, you guys, so I wanted to do a topic here today that was brought to my attention from one of my Instagram fans. A friend of mine in the keto space, Temple dietitian. She actually, or Temple nutritionist. Sorry, Temple, I'm slaughtering your username. She's not on here right now, but if she was on here, and she's watching on the replay probably, go look her up. She's one of the new kids on the block when it comes to teaching about keto, but she's really smart and really kind of into teaching about keto if you're looking for a new voice to follow. But she told me about this brand new study that came out last month, actually, and it was paid for by the Beyond Meat company. So you guys know Beyond Meat. They're the ones that have the so-called plant-based burger, and you can see them in the stores. And so I've talked a lot about these vegan burgers. Last year, I actually tried the Beyond Meat burger on camera. It was gross. The smell was just... Ugh. I've smelled dead cows that don't smell that bad. That's how bad it was. Now, the finished product itself, once it was cooked, was not as bad. It was actually pretty decent. But the point was, it's fake food. And so they've been trying to justify this fake food for a very long time. And so now that Beyond Meat has a little bit of money, and of course they have all these billionaires and millionaires backing them, that's literally the only reason they're still propped up. They have come out with this new study I want to talk about here today called the Swap Meat Study. So let's dissect this. Let's take a little bit closer look at this Swap Meat Study if you haven't heard of that before. And again, this came out about a month ago. And so Swap Meat actually stands for Study with Appetizing Plant Food Meat Eating Alternative Trial. That's what Swap Meat stands for. And so it's a randomized crossover trial on the effect of plant-based compared with animal-based meat on this thing called trimethylmelanin N oxide, which we'll learn about here in a minute what that means. The short name for that is Tmao. We'll talk about that here in just a second. And cardiovascular disease risk factors in generally healthy adults. So before I get into the study itself, which by the way was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, so a very prestigious journal, the reason it got there was one of the study participants, the senior study author, is this guy named Christopher Gardner. Now, maybe his name sort of kind of rings a bell to you. Well, he did one of the seminal studies way back in the early days of when I first got online, somewhere around 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. He was the guy that authored the A to Z study. The A to Z study was a look at all the popular diets at the time: Atkins, Zone, Dean Ornish low-fat diet, vegan diet. He went down the line. And what he concluded was the Atkins diet, the low-carb diet, actually performed the best amongst all the diets when it came to weight loss and various cardiometabolic risk markers. So it was huge because he himself is a vegetarian. And I've interviewed Christopher Gardner a couple times on the Live and La Vida Low Carb show. Really, really nice guy. He's an actual scientist who tends to do things the right way. So when I saw his name on this paper, I thought, okay, that makes me want to take a closer look at it. But as you're going to find out, it's not a great study. And before I get into the details of the study, again, this was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, August 11th, 2020. If you want to go look it up, a randomized crossover trial on a plant-based compared with animal-based meat on various disease markers. So, swap meat is what they called it. All right, so let me read from their press release about this, because usually when you get the press release, it's a little more easy to consume, and then we can get into the weeds of the study itself. So here's the headline. Plant-based meat lowers some cardiovascular risk factors compared with red meat, study finds. A diet that includes an average of 2 servings of plant-based meat alternatives lowers some cardiovascular risk factors compared with a diet that instead includes the same amount of animal meat, according to Stanford medicine scientists. Okay. I still have a problem calling these plant-based burgers meat. I just do. No, meat is meat. Nothing else. It's just meat is meat. When we start blurring terms like this, and I think it's by design that they did this, the company that paid for this study is called Beyond Meat. So meat's in the title of their company. And then it's the Beyond Meat Burgers. And then they're talking about plant-based meat. It's almost an oxymoron. Plant-based meat. No, meat is not plant-based, and plants can't be meat. So there is no such thing as plant-based meat. But anyway, that's a little personal. It just irks me when I see plant-based meat. But lower some cardiovascular risk markers. Well, did they look at them all? And what we're going to find out is they did not. They looked at very specific ones, and I would say very new ones that we don't really have enough data on to know whether or not it means something. We have plenty of data from previous studies of what researchers used, and I'm all for using the latest technology in determining data points that you're trying to study. But when you use something that is so new and then make it the focus of everything you did in the study, which is what they did with this Tmao, which I'm going to tell you about here in a minute, it's amazing to me. I'd never heard of any other trial out there, research paper out there, that uses Tmao as the primary marker of cardiovascular health. But let's get into this a little more. And if you're just joining us, yes, there is a brand new study called the Swap Meat Study. It was funded by this vegan burger company, Beyond Meat. And they make some very interesting conclusions about people who eat plant-based burgers versus people who eat real red meat. Swapping out red meat for plant-based meat alternatives can lower some cardiovascular risk factors, according to a brand new study out of Stanford. This small study was funded by an unrestricted gift from Beyond Meat, which makes plant-based meat alternatives. Beyond Meat pretty much gave them a blank check, and they said, we don't care what it costs. Go out there and prove that eating plant-based burgers is better than eating a real burger. Unrestricted gift. This is key, guys. When you go to an academic institution like Stanford, and you tell researchers, look, I just want a positive outcome for my company to brag about how amazing our plant-based burgers are, go do it and I'll give you all the money you need. What academic institution is going to turn that money down? They're not. Now, I'm not saying that there was nefarious activity that went on. I'm not saying that the scientists didn't do this on the up and up. I do know from previous Jimmy Rants topics that I've talked about with you that Coca-Cola has also been extremely intricately involved in studies where they too offered unrestricted gifts. And in the end, if the research did not make them look good, they silenced it. They never let it come to light. And those academic institutions never got any money anymore. So when Beyond Meat comes to Stanford and says, hey, I'm going to give you an unrestricted gift to do a study on our burgers compared to red meat, there's kind of an unspokenness to, you better give me results that make my company look good or your funding will dry up. Because see, here's the thing. They have this very prestigious study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. This ain't the only study they'll do. They'll do several studies using that unrestricted gift from Beyond Meat, and they'll keep pumping out studies. So it's unfortunate that we have companies so intricately involved in nutritional health science, but this is where we are. And the reason why I bring these out on Jimmy Rants is I feel like the average consumer has no idea just how close the ties are between the funding of these studies and the results that they get. Like, it makes sense. What would be Beyond Meat's motivation? What would be Coca-Cola's motivation for doing research and having researchers do research on their product to make them look better? Like, literally, that's all it is. And we have to look at this as marketing. Unfortunately, it's marketing disguised as science. And when it's in the scientific literature, then it starts getting quoted. That's where we have problems. So they gave some caveats. The researchers used products from the company, again, Beyond Meat, to compare the health effects of meat with plant-based alternatives. Beyond Meat, they say, was not involved in designing or conducting the study and did not participate in data analysis. I guarantee you, had they gotten a negative outcome, that Beyond Meat would have said, nope, you're not publishing that data. There's no freaking way they would give them, let's just say they gave them $2 million. There's no way they would give them $2 million to conduct this research. They do the research and they find, oh my gosh, cardiovascular risk goes up. Oh my gosh, inflammation goes up. Oh my gosh, people get worse in their health, not better, eating the Beyond Meat burger compared to meat. They can't have that. No. So they would have squelched it. We know that. And so they can pretend like, oh, we weren't involved at all. Yeah, screw you. Yeah, you were. And again, back to the unspoken. When you give money and you give a blank check, it's assumed you better make the company giving you the money look good, or that money is going to dry up. Let's not pretend like that's not what happened here, because it is. It may seem obvious that a patty made of plants is a healthier option than a hamburger. This is the press release for Stanford. So they think it's obvious that a plant-based burger would be healthier than a burger. It's so obvious. There's no bias there, is it? These are supposed to be researchers totally letting the science speak for itself. And there's a very strong opinion, because I think most of us in the keto and carnivore community would say just the opposite. It may seem obvious that a patty made of beef is a healthier option than one made with plants and a bunch of junk. That's what we would say. But they said just the opposite. But many of the new meat alternatives, such as Beyond Meat, have relatively high levels of saturated fat and added sodium and considered highly processed. They're worried about the saturated fat content of Beyond Meat burgers. They're worried about the sodium, No, 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 no. Guys, go look up, when you're done watching Jimmy Rants, go do a DuckDuckGo search. Beyond Meat ingredients. And when you look at those ingredients, it's about 28 or 9 different ingredients, and it's nothing more than a chemical crap storm. Forget about the macronutrients. Saturated fat, none of that's important. Look at what's actually in it. Those ingredients are atrocious. And for them to say, well, we're worried about the relatively high levels of saturated fat. Yeah, you need to be worried about the high levels of junk that they put in this. And the last time I checked, a beef burger has 1 ingredient: beef. The Beyond Meat burger has 28, 29 ingredients. Bleh. Right? They're made with food isolates and extracts as opposed to whole beans or chopped mushrooms. All of these factors have been shown to contribute to cardiovascular disease risk, says Christopher Gardner, the professor of medicine at Stanford Prevention Research Center. Listen to this. He says there's been sort of a backlash against these new meat alternatives. Remember, Gardner himself is a vegetarian. The question is, if you're using added sodium and coconut oil, which is high in saturated fat, and using processed ingredients, is the product still actually healthy? I think that's a great question. Again, Gardner, I think, in his heart of hearts, is a real scientist and researcher. Unfortunately, I think money speaks louder than integrity sometimes. And in this case, he's speaking truth. Yes, it has coconut oil, but it's also mixed with the processed food in these burgers. And he's dead right. Dead right. So they wanted to find out by doing a study. He and his team, Christopher Gardner and his team, gathered a group of more than 30 individuals, assigned them to 2 different diets, each one for 8 weeks. One diet called for 2 daily servings of meat, regular red meat. The options were primarily red meat. They did have chicken at times, but primarily red meat. And one called for at least 2 daily servings of the plant-based burgers. In particular, this is important. Listen to this. In particular, the researchers measured the level of a molecule, trimethylamine N oxide, TMAO, in the body. They say here TMAO has been linked to cardiovascular disease risk. They found that TMAO levels were lower when study participants were eating plant-based meat. Let's stop there. If one of the primary markers of what they were trying to track in this study was cardiovascular risk, why would you not run a traditional inflammation marker? Yes, TMAO is a proxy for inflammation, but you could run an HSCRP. You can. You could run an IGF-1. That's another inflammation marker. You could run a homocysteine. All of these have been used very thoroughly in past research. So why all of a sudden in this study trying to compare side-by-side meat eating versus plant meat eating, why suddenly is TMAO the gold standard in cardiovascular health? Why aren't we looking at a full lipid panel, specifically triglycerides and HDL and the ratio? There are so many other ways they could have quantified cardiovascular risk other than this TMAO. Now, I don't know a whole lot about TMAO, but it's interesting that my first introduction to it is in a study where they're actually trying to determine cardiovascular risk. Why? There are so many other good markers that have been used in previous research. And I think, guys, this is by design. When they introduce a new marker like this TMAO, they're trying to muddy the water a bit. Because if you use traditional forms of inflammation and traditional markers for measuring cardiovascular risk, you would see apples to apples comparison. They could have done insulin, postprandial insulin. They could have done any number of things, but they did not. They did not. A paper describing the results of the study was published August 11th in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which I have a copy of right here. Gardner is the senior author of the paper. Postdoctoral scholar Anthony Cremarco, PhD, is the lead author. All right, so let's look at the actual study and then we'll get back to the press release that is about it. If you just joined us late, I am going over and we're dissecting the results of this study called SWAP Meat. SWAP Meat stands for Study with Appetizing Plant Food, which is what they're calling the plant-based burgers, like Beyond Meat burgers. Meat Eating Alternative Trial, SWAP Meat, that's what it stands for. And they're claiming that it's an increased risk of cardiovascular risk and some other health issues when you consume these regular meat versus doing the plant-based burgers. And so we're going over that study. I'm going to go over the actual study right now, and then we'll go back to the press release and dissect it some more. Okay. So the background to this study: despite the rising popularity of plant-based alternative meats, there is limited evidence of the health effects of these products. There's not rising popularity. Let's just correct that right off the bat. They want there to be rising popularity. What I have observed in paying attention, because that's what I do, I pay attention to health trends, I have seen the plant-based burger movement, the fake meat, flop bigger than anything. Remember last year when we had all those Impossible Whopper commercials on TV, like every other commercial for Burger King? I remember plant-based burgers are now in all these restaurants, all these fast food restaurants, got into Starbucks, got into McDonald's. It was everywhere. Where are those advertisements now? If it's so popular, why aren't we seeing there be a demand for it? And we're even seeing, I've read a couple of news articles this year where in Canada, in the Starbucks and in McDonald's, the plant-based burgers totally flopped. The plant-based breakfast items that they put in the Starbucks totally flopped. They got rid of them. And it's soon to happen in the ones here in America too. Nobody wants fake food. And if they do want fake food, they sure the heck don't want a fake plant-based burger when they can go and have whatever junk food they want. So I don't agree that there's a rising popularity. So what was the objective of the SWAP Meat study? We aim to compare the effects of consuming plant-based alternatives as opposed to animal meat on health factors. The primary outcome was fasting serum levels, that's blood, of that Tmao I was talking about. Secondary outcomes. So the only primary marker they were looking at is this Tmao. Why is that the only primary marker? I don't get it. There's so many other markers that could have made the primary marker that were more popular, more commonly used in other research. Because here's what happens. Researchers look for other research papers that confirm or at least reinforce the findings that they have in their research. So when you introduce Tmao as a marker and it's not really been used in a whole lot of other studies, you're suddenly making your study a novelty because there is nobody else that's used Tmao. Had they used HSCRP as an inflammation marker, had they used triglyceride to HDL ratio, had they used insulin, all of those would have been markers that would have been seen in other studies, and then you can make an apples to apples comparison based on those previous markers. Again, I'm not opposed to Tmao being used in the study, but it should not have been the primary marker that they looked at. I think that's deceptive. Secondary outcomes include the fasting insulin-like growth factor 1, so that is IGF-1. So they use that as a secondary factor, not as the primary, the secondary. Lipids, which is your cholesterol panel, blood glucose, insulin, blood pressure, and weight. Okay, so all of those are pretty good. Unfortunately, they should have been the primary markers, not secondary. So what were the methods? The SWAP Meat study was a single site, meaning they all were in the same facility, randomized crossover trial with no washout period. Guys, this is key. Crossover study means they put half the participants on one wing of it, the other half of the participants on the other wing, and then they swapped. That's what the randomized crossover trial is. But the key here is no washout. Usually when you're testing different nutritional protocols and you're putting people on one protocol and then you're switching it out to the other one, you give a couple of weeks to wash out any effects that would happen from the previous thing that you're looking at. So imagine the people that are on the plant-based meat products, and they do that 8-week period, and then they immediately go right to meat, and vice versa. You've got to wash out that period. If you don't wash out, you get skewed results. And they even admit in the study, we got skewed results, we know, because we didn't do a washout period, which begs the question, why not? Why didn't you do the washout? It would have been very easy. It would have been a lot more ethical. The fact that they even had to mention that in their study is shocking to me. I think he's got some more things he's going to say about the washout period and why they didn't do it here in the press release. But let me get back to the study itself. Participants received plant and animal products, dietary counseling, lab assessments, microbiome assessments. So I do like that they check the microbiome, and anthropometric measurements. Participants were instructed to consume at least 2 servings of plant-based burgers compared with animal for 8 weeks each, while keeping all other foods and beverages as similar as possible between the 2 phases. Here's another problem with this study. They included carbohydrate with it. So when you have a plant-based burger, do you just eat the burger? Yeah, we do, because we're a bunch of weirdos that eat low-carb, keto, carnivore, and it's no big deal, throw away the bun. Guys, they ate the bun. They ate the French fries that came along with it. So say what you want about eating meat. If you add carbohydrate as a variable in that meat eating, you're not doing your body any good. This is why we say you want to eat low carb, moderate protein, high fat as a ketogenic approach, or in the case of carnivore, you want to make sure it's just animal-based food. Once you introduced especially processed carbohydrate to the equation, you mess it all up. Because adding in processed carbohydrates to foods that have saturated fat can be problematic and very dangerous for the person's health. Okay, so what were the results? The 36 participants who provided complete data for both crossover phases included 67% of them, which is about 2/3, were women. 69% were Caucasian. They were an average age of 50 and an average BMI of 28. So on average, the plant-based people ate 2.5 servings of the plant-based burger a day. The animal ate 2.6 servings. So basically the same. So they measured the Tmao, which again, I need to get somebody on my podcast to talk about this marker, because I literally had never heard of this before. Again, it's trimethylamine N oxide. And I would love to learn more about what that is, but this is the primary marker they were looking at, and they found that it was significantly lower overall for the plant group, 2.7, versus the animal group, 4.7, but a significant order effect was observed. So overall, they said it was significantly lower in the plant group, but that was a big difference between 2.7 and 4.7. Again, what does that mean? Not a lot of people that are lay people understand. Had they done it with some of the primary markers that they now have as secondary markers and made those primary, it might have been interesting. So let's see if they get into that a little bit. Oh, here we go. So the LDL cholesterol in the plant people was 109.9 compared to the LDL cholesterol in the animal-based food was 120.7. Really not that statistically different. From a statistical standpoint, those numbers are almost basically the same. And that's another popular cardiovascular risk marker. Doesn't tell you a whole lot. You guys know what I think about LDL-C. It's a completely bogus number. It's estimated, calculated. Where's triglycerides? Where's HDL cholesterol? When he put lipids as one of the secondary markers, I thought it was going to be a full lipid panel. There is no full lipid panel here. We don't know what the total cholesterol was. We don't know what the HDL was. We don't know what the triglycerides were. We don't know any of that information because all they focused on was LDL, and LDL is a highly flawed marker. But even still, statistically, between the plant and the animal, no difference. And in their weight, the plant-based group was 78.7 kilo. Multiply that times 2.3, and that's pounds. And the animal base was 79.6 kilo. Statistically, no different. So literally the only marker where they found some semblance of difference is this mysterious Tmao, which nobody knows what the bleep it is. Why didn't they use HSCRP? Why didn't they use some of the others? And some of the other secondary markers that they said they're looking at, guess what? They weren't statistically different either. Remember IGF-1? No statistical difference. Glucose, insulin, they don't mention it here. Why? This is the study. In the study, you say a secondary marker is all these things, and then you don't tell me what those things are? You see why I'm jaded about this swap meat study being so bogus? The conclusions, among generally healthy adults, which is what they describe these people in the study, contrasting plant with animal intake while keeping all other dietary components similar, the plant products improved several cardiovascular disease risk factors. No, they didn't. They improved one, and it's one suspect one. Show me triglycerides. Show me HDL. Show me insulin. Show me homocysteine levels. Show me where it's different. Show me where there's this grand, beautiful difference between those. And they don't have that info. They just don't. The weight wasn't that much different. Everything was basically the same except for this TMAO. And that's the thing that they're trying to make a big deal about. It's almost as if they say, okay, let's run a bunch of markers. Let's find something that's statistically different enough that we can make a big deal about it, and we'll call that the primary marker. When they saw all these secondary markers were basically the same, they're like, great. We can't make a splash unless we make a big deal about this TMAO thing. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. And I'm going, hold my beer, because that doesn't say anything. It doesn't. There were no adverse effects on risk factors from the plant products. Well, we don't know because they didn't reveal all of the results. And that's what ticks me off about these studies. They try to make a mountain out of a molehill of an obscure marker like TMAO, and then the real markers that everybody is familiar with, they're like, oh yeah, it didn't really have much of a change, so we hope you don't notice that. There's no difference. So, comparing the burgers, as nearly all plant-based meats are fairly high in saturated fat and classified as processed, Gardner wanted to study how they affect the body compared with red meat. He and his team conducted this study with those 36 participants for 16 weeks. Remember, they did 8 weeks on each of the trials with no washout period. Gardner designed the research as a crossover study, meaning participants acted as their own control. That's another flaw in the study. When you allow study participants to be their own control, guess what happens? It's not controlled. I'm surprised this got into the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition and got past peer review. The only reason it did is because of Christopher Gardner's name and clout in the scientific realm. There's no way this would have gotten published in a major journal like that by anybody off the street, Joe Schmo researcher. They wouldn't have done it. It was a poor choice not to wash out between the two and to have the participants acting as their own control, meaning they're the ones that got to decide what do we add to the plant-based burger and add to the animal food and to keep them the same in both. And I wonder if even psychologically some of these study participants said, oh, well, we know the plant-based burger is healthier, so why don't I not eat the bun with that one, but then eat the bun with the dastardly red meat so it looks bad? Guys, if you leave it to the devices of the study participants, why wouldn't they do that? We're all psychological beings, and we all have our own methodologies of, oh, we know the plant-based burger is healthier, so let's help them out by ditching the bun. We'll tell them we ate the bun, but we really didn't. For 8 weeks, half of the participants ate the plant-based diet, while the other half ate the meat-based diet, consisting primarily of red meat, although some participants did have a small amount of chicken. Then they switched, regardless of which diet participants were on. Both groups had an average of 2 servings of meat, which we said 2.5 basically for each of them. Carefully tracking their meals in journals, working with Dr. Gardner's team to record their eating habits. The team took precautions to eliminate bias throughout the study, including working with a third party at Stanford called the Quantitative Sciences Unit to analyze the data once all the participants were done with their 16-week of dietary interventions. So this QSU helped draw a statistical analysis plan, which they published online before the study was completed. That way the plan was public, and they were accountable for the primary and secondary outcomes, namely the Tmao, blood cholesterol, blood pressure, and weight. Again, in the study details that I got, there was no mention of anything other than Tmao and the LDL cholesterol. They didn't mention blood pressure. They did show weight, and the weight was basically the same, so it was statistically irrelevant. But they didn't do this on the up and up. They can pretend like it all they want. The main outcome the team was interested in tracking was Tmao. Christopher Gardner calls it an emerging risk factor. Emerging is the key word there. I literally have been online 15 plus years. I've interviewed thousands and thousands of researchers and doctors and people on my podcast, and not one single one of them has ever mentioned Tmao as a primary outcome. None. So if it's emerging, it means not yet tested well enough. So if it's not yet tested well enough, why are we putting it out there in a study that's supposed to be showing these Beyond Meat burgers are the bee's knees in your health? They're doing it because they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes to show you that there was some kind of a benefit when they found no benefit whatsoever compared to beef. Guys, don't get fooled by this. This is why, and again, thank you, Temple, on Instagram for bringing this to my attention. This is why this kind of thing needs to be responded to, because people will say, well, I heard there's studies that support eating plant-based burgers a lot better than beef. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a study that says that, but did the study actually show that? Not really. There seems to be a connection between having higher levels of Tmao and an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, but the connection has yet to be definitively proved. They're admitting it right here in the press release that they're using a marker that is emerging as a risk factor in cardiovascular disease, but there's no connection been proven yet. So why, pray tell, is it the primary marker when we have plenty of other proven markers that could have been the primary marker, and you know why? It wouldn't have been any change. It would have shown either the same between beef and the plant-based burgers, or the beef would have performed better. And that would not have been good for Beyond Meat. Let's not fool ourselves. You pull a TMAO right out of your keister and say, oh yeah, we're going to make that the primary marker. Even though the marker has not been proven in any way, shape, form, or fashion, let's use it anyway. And let's make a big deal about it. Well, guess what? I'm making a big deal that it's big whoop. Because it really is. 2 of the precursors to TMAO are carnitine and choline. They are found in red meat. So it's possible individuals who regularly eat beef, pork, or lamb for dinner will simply have higher levels of TMAO. Naturally so. I mean, literally, of TMAO, the basic components, the precursors to that being developed is carnitine and choline. Guys, that's components in red meat. So why would we assume higher levels of TMAO in people eating red meat is necessarily a bad thing? Again, they don't know that it's a bad thing. They're only assuming, probably based on associations. Associations do not prove causations in any way. Even Christopher Gardner said, at this point, we cannot be sure that TMAO is a causal risk factor at all. Guys, they are basically saying, yeah, here's the study that shows plant-based burgers is everything that you think they are, as opposed to red meat burgers. But then they're having the caveat, well, we don't really know that TMAO really means anything. Shh, don't tell Beyond Meat. We think the study is bogus. That's what I hear reading this. This is right here. This is from Stanford's website talking about their study. This isn't a newspaper column. This is their press release, and they're admitting all this. Gardner says he sees a reason to pay attention to TMAO readouts. Yeah, it's called this. When you've got Beyond Meat giving you a blank check to do whatever you want in a study, that is the reason you use the TMAO marker. Really no other reason. He says in the past few years, studies have shown that high levels of TMAO are consistent with increased inflammation and blood clotting, among other concerns. Well, here's the thing. If you think TMAO being elevated is consistent with increased inflammation, why didn't you do inflammation markers? Yes, they did IGF-1, was not in the results that I saw in the actual study. Where was HSCRP? Where is homocysteine? There are ways to track inflammation without having a proxy marker like TMAO. You see how they're muddying the waters to get the result they want? This is what ticks me off about nutritional health research. They say, look, there's a clown. Look, the clown's right there. Look, the clown, the clown, the clown. And meanwhile, there's a T-Rex behind you. But they want you to look at the clown. You see how this works? Gardner points to a study in which researchers found that people with elevated TMAO had a 60% higher risk for adverse cardiovascular events, blah, 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 blah. Okay, 60% higher risk. It could be a relative risk versus an actual risk. Yeah, I hate these association and relative risks. In Gardner's study, the researchers observed that participants who had the red meat diet during the first 8-week phase had an increase in their TMAO, while those who ate the plant-based diet first did not. But then something peculiar happened when they switched the diets. Those who transitioned from meat to plant had a decrease in TMAO levels, which was expected. Again, the precursor are those elements of meat, carnitine and choline. So when you get off of red meat and you go to a non-red meat diet, which is what these plant-based burgers are, it should be no shock that TMAO levels would come down since those things aren't in the other. Something peculiar happened when they switched. Those who switched from the plant to the meat did not see an increase in TMAO. So when they started off the study, the people that were on the plant-based for 8 weeks then switched to meat, they didn't see their TMAO go up. I wonder if there was some kind of a carryover effect that came from the plant-based that kept it artificially lower Of course, we also don't know what effects some of the other foods that they ate with it had to do with that. So Dr. Gardner said it was pretty shocking because we hypothesized it wouldn't matter what order the diets were in. So this is another problem with their study, and another problem with why they should have done a washout period. It might have prevented some of these flawed results. It turns out that there are bacterial species responsible for this initial step of creating TMAO in the gut. These species are thought to flourish in people whose diets are red meat heavy, but perhaps not in those who avoid meat. So, once again, the microbiome comes into the equation. So for the participants who had the plant-based diet first, during which they had no meat, we basically made them a vegetarian, and in doing so may have inadvertently blunted their ability to make TMAO even when they started eating meat again. Whether this type of approach could be used as a strategy for decreasing cardiovascular disease risk remains to be seen. So outside of TMAO, health benefits conveyed from the plant-based alternatives extended to weight and levels of LDL. No matter which diet was first, participants' levels of LDL dropped on average 10 milligrams per deciliter, which is, they say it's statistically significant. 10 points in your LDL is statistically, no. You can't shine that turd up and make it look like it's a diamond. I'm sorry. 10 points? So you basically dropped your LDL, let's say, from 120 to 110. Woo! That's supposed to be statistically significant. They also said it was clinically significant. Ooh, what does that do? Not really much. In addition, the participants lost 2 pounds on average during the plant-based portion. Well, that's the thing. They're saying that it's statistically different and the weight loss, but so did the meat people. So did the people who had the animal food. They're acting like this was the only group that got the benefit. There was no difference between the two groups except for this very esoteric TMAO marker. Everything else was basically the same. The lead researcher, I think this increases the importance of diet quality. Not all highly processed foods are created equal. They are seriously making the case that a highly processed food, which is what they admit Beyond Meat is a high quality food. And again, guys, who is paying them? Who is paying for their research? Beyond Meat. Who wants to keep getting the money to do research so they can keep getting funding and keep their jobs and keep doing the things, getting published, blah, blah, blah? Stanford University. You see why these strange bedfellows do not need to be in the business of working together? This is why nutritional health science is a virtual crap storm. Gardner hopes to continue studying the relationship between health and plant-based meat alternatives. Oh, I bet he does. I bet that blank check is just hitting him in the face and he's like, okay, what other kind of fake study can we do next? Oh, let's do this. And they'll do some other contrived study. He says he wants to look specifically into the changes that happen in the microbiome. He's also interested in expanding the research into diet patterns overall. Maybe next we'll look at the combination of dietary factors on health, perhaps alternative meat compared with alternative dairy products. So comparing things like Beyond Meat with like almond milk. That would be interesting. So anyway, that's the study, you guys. I thought, you know what? This is probably going to get out there in the mainstream and there's going to be some interest. Well, did you hear the plant-based burgers outperform the beef burgers and what do you think and da-da-da. And I just wanted you guys to know the real deal of what's happening in this study. To me, it's a whole lot of nothing. Like there's nothing in this study that is making me run out and want to eat a plant-based burger. Not even in the slightest. I'm not convinced. TMAO, that's your argument? That's what you think is the thing that's going to turn people around? No. So many other markers they could have used. But they decided to use that one. And listen to me, they used that one by design. It's a smokescreen to get the study published, to show some kind of significant result. They got the splash in the science that they wanted, but they haven't really convinced anybody. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. I'm going to come over here first to Instagram, then over to Facebook, finally over to YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Let's see what you guys have to say about this one here today. Rachel says, I've never tried one of the Beyond Meat burgers, and I hope I never have to. Rachel, you do YouTube videos now, girl. You have to go on camera. I want to see your reaction. Especially when you pull it out in the raw form. It's got like this beet juice to, basically mimic blood. It smells putrid. I mean, it's disgusting in the raw form. I remember going, oh. But once you get it in the pan, you see all the coconut oil starting to melt out, and it actually does cook very well. It does look very much like a burger. And they put enough liquid smoke in it that it does have somewhat of a taste of a burger, and it definitely has a good bite and mouthfeel. But I wouldn't eat that stuff on the regular. There's no way. I did it to show everybody on camera what it looked like and what my reaction was. But no, good old-fashioned beef. Don't mess with it. Brain Dead Zombie Chick says Tmao. What's that? So yeah, I kind of went over it in the rant. Tmao is this marker that they were using. It stands for trimethylamine N oxide, and apparently it's been linked to cardiovascular disease risk and inflammation. But my problem is, and even Dr. Gardner in the study, he says that it's really not been vetted out. It's really no marker that we really have any evidence about. And yet they used it as the primary marker. That's what I didn't get. I didn't understand, if it's not vetted out, why would you use it as a primary marker? They could have easily made HSCRP the primary marker if they wanted to look at inflammation. They could have easily used triglyceride to HDL ratio as a primary marker if they wanted to see cardiovascular risk. There's so many things they could have done that they did not do. And again, I will argue they did those things by design to get the desired outcome so that the money would keep coming in for their research from Beyond Meat. Rachel says, I guess that's a good idea. I'll have to try it after all. Yes, Rachel, you will have the most views on your video if you cook up, and of course you're hilarious on camera as it is. I can't wait to see your reaction once you put it real close to your nose and that would be amazing. Just don't actually barf. That would be horrible. So thank you, Instagram. Let's pop over here now to my YouTube or my Facebook channel, and then over to YouTube here in a second. Let's see what you guys have to say. What's up, Facebook? The ingredient in the Impossible Burger, or even worse, ingredient, says Heidi. Yeah, after the Beyond Meat one, I was like, okay, I'm done with the fake burgers. I'll assume Impossible is just as putrid. But yeah, I agree. Most of these can't possibly be healthier than real food, which is what beef is. It's unfortunate that we've gotten to this point where people would rather have a highly processed, which even Christopher Gardner admits, the Beyond Meat burgers, highly, highly processed burger, they even admit it, is somehow better than real whole foods. I'm sorry, there is no processed food that's going to trump real whole foods ever. None. Eat real whole foods. Beef is a real whole food. And it's unfortunate that's become blurred. All right, thank you, Facebook. Now let me pop over here now to my YouTube channel. It's always an adventure on YouTube, so thank you guys. And look at all those comments that came in while I was talking. All right. Harpsy says, I would call them plant patties, only meat can be a burger. Exactly. Yeah, I got a patty for them, all right. It might come out the back end. Is it possible to eat keto vegan? Very, very difficult. Get Ketotarian if you want to learn how. Roland says, so this paper will be cited by friendly journalists and not by the scientific community. It might be cited by other scientists who get money from Beyond Meat. Hunt through the cherry orchard. That's what this study says. Yeah, unfortunately, you're learning, man. That's the way we kind of like go through some of these studies. It's like, let's just pull whatever result we want and then try to prove it. Greener Pasture says many chemicals and processing with plant-based burgers. Eventually you would have heavy toxins in your body. Yes, that's right. Later, they can show lazy journalists a heap of bad studies that make their claims seem legit. Those journalists that push the garbage into the public. Roland, you are speaking my language. Most data can be manipulated to generate the outcome you're searching for. You guys are spot on, man. Most, if not all, studies done are not for the increase of knowledge. Most are done for immediate personal advantage. Unfortunately, follow the money. Greener Pasture says 16 weeks not long enough. Well, I'm okay with the length of time. They were 8 weeks on each diet. What I don't like is we don't know what else they ate on top of the plant-based burger and the burgers. We don't know what else they ate. That's the problem. And if they eliminated that and stripped it down to just the meat products, I think they would have gotten vastly different results. Most of the studies are stopped just prior to significant side effects. You're right, they are. John says 16-week study of food is very long regardless of the study is sound or not. Everything comes down to the money. Yes. Derpy says, hey, I just discovered you a couple of months ago. Love your work. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Long-term plant-based burger eating may have detrimental effects on hormones. We don't know what the effects are. That's the problem. They've only been out there in the mainstream for about a year. Follow the money. That's what everybody's saying. Follow the money. I tried fake food years ago. I stayed sick until I ate real food meat and I got better. Harpsy, that's amazing. John says, how about take responsibility for the food you put in your mouth? Stop shirking responsibility. Exactly. Joshua says, the effects can't be good. They're not good. And I hope now you've been armed with information. Because information is power. And when you have information, and Heidi says Tmao was talked about on Joe Rogan's podcast. Thank you. I will go look up that episode with Chris Kresser on Joe Rogan's podcast. Thank you for that, Heidi. It's so amazing that people are so believing of a study without doing what I did here today, dissecting it down to the meticulous details. Because really the conclusion of what that study was about was in the details. And in the details you saw it was a whole lot of nothing. It's like these politicians that just blah, 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 blah for like 10, 20 minutes. And then you go, okay, they didn't say anything. So that's what this study was. Blah, 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 TMAO, blah, 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 and didn't say anything. They didn't. Ultra processed always has bad results. How can it not, Joshua? It has to have bad results, especially if you're comparing it to real whole food. Kira said, if being a vegetarian is so great, why not have vegetables and not fake meat? I thought they hated meat. Yeah, that's been the weird thing for me too, Kira, is they're making all these fake meats. And, I'm thinking, okay, you and a good significant portion of the vegan plant-based community, they abhor the killing of animals. So what are you doing putting beet juice to simulate blood on a burger if you think that blood is somehow immoral? It is so weird, Kira. I agree with you. Now, some eat that way for the so-called health benefits, but yeah, very, very strange. Eat your vegetables. If you think that's going to give you satiety and make you feel good and all the things, eat that. And I would rather you eat the vegetables anyway, because it's real whole food compared to this 27, 28 ingredient chemical crap storm. That's the problem. All right, so thank you guys for watching today about this study result. Tell people about the swap meat study. Tell them the things you learned here today, and little by little, we will get the message out, one person at a time. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. Go follow me right here on Instagram at Living Low Carb Man. LivinLowCarbMan. Once you're there, we are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So always be here. I will always be here unless I tell you otherwise. So 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. We also simulcast on my Facebook page as well as over on my YouTube channel. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay on IGTV right here on Instagram. We also throw the past episodes up over on YouTube. Just type in a keyword Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. Today is the Living La Vida Low Carb Show Jimmy Rants Day. So on Tuesdays on my flagship show at llvlc.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, I air previous episodes, the audio of previous Jimmy Rants episodes. So I have 2 episodes that we run back to back, and I'm thinking they're related to COVID-19. I'm trying to remember what exactly they were about. But go listen today, Living La Vida Low Carb Show. And then finally, pop on over to the official website of this show. It's JimmyRants.com. You can see all the past episodes there. And while you're there, if you love what I do here, I love doing what I do. And if you get benefit out of this, definitely consider throwing a donation my way through the Patreon link or through the PayPal link. And a donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. Again, at JimmyRants.com. All right, guys, let me pop off of here for now. We will see you again tomorrow.